Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be diving deep into a book that has had a pretty big impact on me personally. And the book is called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And it's all about how to achieve extraordinary results by focusing on just one thing at a time.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about this. It's such a timely topic.
I feel like we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to do more, be more, achieve more, and it can be so overwhelming, right?
Absolutely. It's like we're all trying to juggle a million things at once and we end up feeling scattered and unproductive.
Exactly. And I think that's where The One Thing comes in. It's a book that really challenges that notion and suggests that true success lies in simplifying and focusing our efforts.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, exactly. It's about prioritizing and making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy.
I love that. So what are some of the key takeaways that you've gleaned from the one thing?
Well, one of the things that really jumped out at me was Keller's take on multitasking. He pretty much throws it out the window, claiming it's actually a productivity killer.
Interesting. So he's advocating for single tasking instead.
Precisely. He argues that our brains aren't designed for true multitasking. Every time we switch between tasks, we lose time and mental energy reorienting ourselves.
I've definitely noticed that when I try to do too many things at once, I end up feeling more scattered and less effective.
Right. It's not just about feeling scattered. There's an actual cognitive cost to trying to do too many things at once.
That makes a lot of sense. So if multitasking is a myth, what's the alternative? How do we approach our work and our lives in a way that's more focused and productive?
Well, Keller suggests that we need to shift our mindset from busyness to effectiveness. It's not about checking off a million things on our to-do list. It's about identifying those high-impact actions that align with our one thing and making them our priority.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing and making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy.
I love that. So what are some practical strategies for identifying and focusing on our one thing?
One tool that Keller provides is the focusing question. It's a powerful question that forces us to prioritize and get to the heart of what truly matters.
What is this focusing question?
It goes like this. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's about identifying that key domino, that one action that will have a ripple effect on all your other goals and efforts. It's not about what's urgent or what's screaming the loudest for our attention. It's about strategically choosing that one thing that will unlock the most progress.
So it's like finding the linchpin that holds everything together.
Exactly. And once you've identified your one thing, Keller emphasizes the importance of making it visible. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, whatever works for you. It becomes your North Star guiding your actions and decisions throughout the day.
I like that having a visual reminder to help stay focused. That makes a lot of sense. But what happens when those inevitable distractions pop up or when other opportunities come knocking? I imagine it can be quite difficult to stay laser focused on our one thing when the world is throwing all sorts of things our way.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely takes discipline and a conscious effort to stay focused. And that's where the art of saying no comes in.
Ah, yes, the power of no. It's a crucial skill for anyone looking to achieve extraordinary results, but it can be so hard to say no sometimes, especially when we want to be helpful and we don't want to disappoint people.
I completely agree. It can be super challenging. But Keller argues that saying no to the things that don't align with our one thing is actually a way of saying yes to what truly matters. It's about protecting our time and energy for the things that will have the greatest impact on our goals.
That's a great point. It's about being selective and making conscious choices about how we spend our time. I'm reminded of that quote, "The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything."
That's a great quote, and it perfectly illustrates the point. Keller actually takes it a step further and introduces the concept of hell yes or no.
Hell yes or no? Tell me more about this.
It's pretty simple, actually. If an opportunity or request doesn't elicit a resounding hell yes from you, then it's a no.
I love that. It's such a clear and concise way to filter out distractions and stay focused on what truly matters.
Right. It really simplifies the decision-making process. And speaking of simplifying, Keller also talks about the importance of creating an environment that supports focus and productivity.
So that means eliminating distractions and setting boundaries.
Exactly. It might mean creating a dedicated workspace free from distractions, communicating your need for focus time to family or colleagues, or even something as simple as silencing your phone notifications. Those little things can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Even small distractions can have a cumulative effect on our focus. It's about being intentional about our surroundings and minimizing anything that pulls us away from our one thing.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where we can truly focus and do our best work. And, that brings us to another important point that Keller makes in the book, the connection between our physical health and our mental energy and focus.
Ah, yes, the mind-body connection. It's something we often overlook, but it's so crucial for our overall well-being and productivity.
Absolutely. If we're not taking care of ourselves physically, it's going to be that much harder to stay mentally sharp and focused. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You're not going to get very far.
So true. It's like we're trying to operate on fumes.
Exactly. And Keller emphasizes the importance of sleep, nutrition, and exercise as essential ingredients for maximizing our mental energy and focus.
So it's about nourishing our bodies and minds to fuel our success. I like that. It's a holistic approach to productivity.
It is. It really is. And, there's one more thief of productivity that Keller talks about in the book, the fear of chaos.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people struggle with this, myself included. It's that feeling that if we let go of control and focus on just one thing, everything else will fall apart.
It's like we're afraid to drop all the other balls we're juggling.
Exactly. But what the one thing encourages us to do is to embrace a bit of chaos and trust that focusing on our priority will actually lead to better overall results.
So it's about having faith that things will work out even if we're not constantly micromanaging every aspect of our lives.
Right. It's about shifting our focus from control to trust. And, I think that's a really powerful concept.
It is. It's about letting go of the need to be in control of everything and trusting that things will fall into place when we focus on what truly matters. So, what are some practical tips for overcoming this fear of chaos?
Well, Keller suggests a few things. One is to have a system in place for managing those other tasks effectively. It might mean delegating, automating, or scheduling them for later. It's about creating a structure that allows us to focus on our one thing without feeling like everything else is falling apart.
That makes sense. It's about having a plan in place so that we can let go of the need to constantly worry about everything else.
Right. So what I think is cool about the one thing is that it's really a call to action. It's
Yeah.
about making conscious choices, simplifying our lives, and focusing our energy on what truly matters. And it's about trusting that by doing so, we can achieve extraordinary results.
I love that. It's about taking control of our lives and creating the success we desire.
Okay.
It's about empowering ourselves to live more fulfilling and productive lives.
Yes, and with less stress, too.
Absolutely. Less stress, more focus, more impact. Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly. And, I think one of the key takeaways for me from the one thing has been this shift in mindset from busyness to effectiveness. It's not about checking off a million things on our to-do list. It's about identifying those high-impact actions that align with our one thing and making them our priority.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing and making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy.
And it's about being intentional with our actions and making sure that they're aligned with our goals and values.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about work either. These principles can be applied to all areas of our lives, relationships, health, personal growth, you name it. It's about finding that one thing that will make the biggest difference in each area and making it our focus.
So it's a holistic approach to life, not just a productivity hack. I love that.
It is. It really is. And, speaking of holistic approach, there's another interesting concept that Keller introduces in the book, the idea of a success list rather than a traditional to-do list.
Interesting. I never heard of a success list before. What's the difference?
Well, a traditional to-do list can often become this overwhelming, never-ending inventory of tasks that leaves us feeling scattered and unfocused. A success list, on the other hand, is about identifying those essential tasks that align with our one thing and prioritizing them accordingly. It's about being intentional with our time and energy and ensuring that our actions are moving us closer to our goals.
So it's about focusing on the things that truly matter, the things that will move the needle.
Exactly. It's not about simply reacting to everything that comes our way. It's about proactively choosing those actions that will have the greatest impact on our overall success. It's about aligning our actions with our priorities and making sure that we're spending our time on what truly matters.
I love that. It's about taking ownership of our time and our lives and making conscious choices about how we want to spend them.
Precisely. It's about being intentional and focused, And it's about trusting that by doing so, we can achieve extraordinary results.
But there's this really cool analogy that Keller uses in the book to illustrate how we can make progress towards our goals. It's called the domino effect. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's a powerful concept, isn't it? So the basic idea is that achieving goals is kind of like setting up a chain of dominoes. One small domino can topple a much larger one, creating a ripple effect of success. Do you remember that example he gives about those 28 dominoes knocking over the Empire State Building?
Oh, yeah, that was a mind-blowing example. It seems almost impossible, but it actually works.
Right. And I think it just really highlights the power of momentum. By starting with the right one thing, that key domino, you can trigger a chain reaction that makes subsequent goals easier to achieve.
It's like setting off a chain reaction of success.
Exactly. And, it's not about trying to tackle everything at once. It's about strategically choosing that initial action that will set everything else in motion.
It's about focusing on the lead domino and letting the momentum carry you forward.
Okay, I'm totally on board with focusing on one thing. But what if I pick the wrong one thing? What if I miss out on other opportunities?
Those are totally valid concerns. It's important to remember that your one thing isn't set in stone, right? It can and should evolve as you grow and your goals change. The whole point is to prioritize and create focus, not to limit yourself.
That actually makes me feel better.
Right.
It's not about getting it perfect from the get-go. It's more about having a starting point, right? And then refining it along the way. But how do we even go about defining our one thing to begin with?
Well, Keller actually offers some really helpful guidance for this. He talks about defining your overall one thing for life and for those specific areas of your life like health, relationships, or finances. He talks about those areas of life that are kind of like glass balls. They need our careful attention and can't be
Oh, I
neglected.
remember that. It's the juggling analogy,
Yeah.
right? He compares work to a rubber ball. You drop it, it bounces back. But those other areas like family, health, personal growth, those are those glass balls, and they can shatter if we don't handle them carefully.
Exactly. And finding your one thing within each of these areas, make sure you're giving those glass balls the attention they deserve.
Okay, so let's just say my overall one thing is to write a best-selling novel. What would be my one thing for today to get me closer to that goal?
Well, you could use the focusing question again, but this time in relation to your goal. So ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do today such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary in terms of writing my novel?
Hmm. So maybe my one thing for today would be to write 1,000 words or maybe create a detailed outline for the next chapter. It's about identifying the action that will make the biggest impact on my progress, right?
Precisely. By focusing solely on that one thing, you're making real progress towards your larger goal. You're setting that lead domino in motion.
Okay, this is all starting to make a lot more sense to me, but let's be real for a second. Distractions are just part of life. How are we supposed to stay focused on our one thing when our phones are buzzing, emails are piling up, and life is just throwing curveballs our way?
Oh, I know, right? That's a challenge we all face, for sure. Keller actually outlines 4 thieves that can steal our time and focus.
Okay, lay it on me. What are they?
Well, first, there's the inability to say no. Second, we have an unsupportive environment. Third, our poor health habits. And last but not least is the fear of chaos.
Okay, let's unpack those a bit. We've already chatted about saying no and how important that is to protect our time and energy. But what about that unsupportive environment? How can we create a space that promotes focus and productivity?
It's really about being intentional about your surroundings. It might mean setting up a dedicated workspace free from distractions, letting your family or colleagues know that you need some focus time, or even just silencing those pesky phone notifications.
Oh, those notifications are a total productivity killer for me. It's just so easy to get sucked into the vortex of social media or constantly checking email.
I feel you. Even those little distractions can really add up and have a big impact on our focus. Now, let's move on to that third thief, poor health habits.
This one really hits home for me because it links back to the idea of willpower being a finite resource, right? If we're not taking care of ourselves physically, it's going to be that much harder to stay mentally sharp and focused.
Totally agree. I mean, think about it. If you're sleep deprived, running on junk food, and not moving your body, your brain simply isn't going to be at its best.
Right. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You just won't get very far.
Exactly. Taking care of our physical health is like investing in our mental energy and focus. It's a must-have for achieving extraordinary results.
Oh, for sure. And that brings us to that fourth thief we mentioned, the fear of chaos. I think this is something a lot of people including myself, struggle with. It's that feeling that if we let go of control and just focus on one thing, everything else will fall apart.
Yep, it's that fear of dropping all the other balls we're juggling. We think that if we're not constantly multitasking, our lives will just descend into chaos.
Exactly. But what the one thing is really encouraging us to do is embrace a little bit of that chaos and trust that focusing on our priority will lead to better overall results.
It's not about neglecting everything else entirely. It's about having a system to manage those other tasks, maybe delegate some things, automate others, or schedule them for later.
Right. So it's all about creating a structure that lets us focus on our one thing without feeling like the world's falling apart around us.
Precisely. And when we can do that, when we eliminate those time thieves and create an environment that supports our focus, we unlock a level of productivity and effectiveness that we never thought possible.
Wow, this has been so insightful. I'm starting to see the world through a one-thing lens. And before we wrap up our deep dive, what's one thing that really resonated with you from the one thing? What's something that you've personally put into practice or found particularly helpful?
Honestly, for me, it's that focus on the power of asking the right questions. Keller really emphasizes how asking those right questions can shape our thinking and help us focus on what truly matters. And that focusing question, what's the one thing I can do, is such a simple but profound tool for prioritizing and making decisions. It's become a bit of a mantra for me in both my personal and professional life.
I love that. It's like a constant reminder to cut through all the clutter and just hone in on what truly moves the needle.
Exactly. And I think that's the real beauty of the one thing. It helps us simplify our lives, focus our energy, and achieve those amazing results by doing less, but doing it better. It's about striking that balance between striving for excellence and embracing a sense of peace and clarity.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's a fantastic note to end our discussion on. It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
Oh, it really has. Lots to think about.
So much good stuff. And, we've talked about multitasking, the power of no, the focusing question, and the domino effect. But there's just so much more that we could unpack from this book.
Oh, absolutely. It's a treasure trove of insights.
It is,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me personally has been this whole shift in perspective from busyness to effectiveness.
I get that.
It's not about how much we're doing, but about what we're actually accomplishing.
Absolutely. It's about making every action count.
Right. And I think that's where the concept of the success list comes in. Do you remember Keller talking about that?
Oh, yeah, the success list. It's such a great idea, isn't it?
I think so too.
Yeah.
Those traditional to-do lists can be so overwhelming. It's just like this endless stream of tasks, and you never feel like you're making any real progress.
They can be a real drain on your energy, can't they?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the success list so different. It's not about just listing everything you need to do. It's about identifying those essential tasks that are actually going to move you closer to your goals.
It's about being strategic and intentional with your time.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your priorities. So instead of just reacting to everything that comes your way, you're actually being proactive and choosing the things that are going to make the biggest impact.
It's about being in the driver's seat, right?
Yes. It's about taking control of your time and your life and making conscious choices about how you want to spend them.
It's about focusing on what truly matters.
And, I think that's what the one thing is really all about, right? It's about simplifying our lives, focusing our efforts, and achieving those extraordinary results by doing less, but doing it better.
It's about being intentional and focused, and it's about trusting that by doing so, we can achieve extraordinary results.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the one thing, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Okay, I like a good challenge.
Remember that focusing question we talked about earlier? Right. The one that helps you identify your one thing.
Yeah. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one. So here's the challenge. Think about one area of your life that you'd like to improve. It could be your health, your career, your relationships, your finances, anything that's important to you.
Anything at all.
Then ask yourself that focusing question. What's the one thing I can do in this area such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Write down your answer and make that your one thing for the next week. Just see what happens when you dedicate your time and energy to that one priority.
I love it. A little experiment to put the power of the one thing to the test.
Exactly. And we'd love to hear about your experience. So come back and share your one thing in the comments. Let us know how it goes. And if you enjoyed our deep dive into the one thing, Be sure to give this episode a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more insightful conversations like this.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive, so stay tuned.
And in the meantime, remember, success is not about doing everything right. It's about doing the right things.
Focus on your one thing.
And watch as the extraordinary unfolds.